There's more mischief, mayhem, and nefarious goings-on in the city of brotherly love than Billy Penn could have ever imagined. We've got it all here on the Twisted Philly podcast. True crime, haunted history, the coolest and creepiest places to visit. Welcome to Twisted Philly.
You guys are going to kick off the show with me. So if not everyone is a listener, you're not going to know what to say. But the listeners should know the 4 words we're going to say, right? Sure. Maybe? Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I'm going to... Is it on? Or I got to get closer?
Yeah, get too close.
I got to get closer? Yeah. Well, shit, I guess I'm taking it off. I guess I'm taking it off the stand then, like the guys did. Is that good? Yeah? Closer? Closer still?
Just like that.
So weird. I usually record standing up, so this is a very different experience for me. All right, so count of 3, 4 words. 1, 2, 3. Hey, Twisters, what up? Holy shit. Welcome to the very first... oh, my God, Nick! Hey! Welcome to the first ever live episode of Twisted Philly. We are recording here at Tattooed Moms as part of Philly Podcast Festival. There are so many people here. Like, I don't even know what to do. I am meeting listeners for the first time tonight. I'm meeting listeners that I've met before. Kim, who came from Lancaster, which that's how you say it. It's not Lancaster. It's Lancaster. Maxine, where did you come from? Delaware, damn. Sarah, where did you come from?
Collegeville.
Okay, you're right up the street from me.
Yeah.
Sharon, where did you come from?
Chester.
Okay. Nick, he's my buddy from work. He came from Philly, so that wasn't that far. So you don't get anything for that. I've got somebody here that I've known for 20. How old is Nick? So 22 years. I'm gonna start crying now. Some of my very dearest friends, Pricey over here. Pricey's picture is up in the closet where I record. So when I want to laugh and when I curse a lot, I'm usually looking at Pricey. Yeah, of course you did. You guys have been day drinking all day long. Her husband Jeff, who's a dear friend, my friend Jackie and Rebecca, and I don't know your names. Could you introduce yourself? Hi. Thank you so much for coming. Is there anybody I missed? Sarah's friend Mara. And I don't know you, sir. Who are you?
Rich.
Hi, Rich. Well, thank you, everyone, very much for coming. How did I get here? Jesus, it's been almost a year since the first episode of Twisted Philly. It launched on August 18th, back in 2016, with The Corpse Collector, which was the story of Harrison Marty Graham, who killed as many as 6, possibly 8 women, but he was only convicted for 6. And he liked to collect their dead bodies and store them in his disgusting apartment. I had no microphone. I had the built-in microphone for my Surface, and if you guys listened to the show, you heard that shitty audio for the first 6 to 8 episodes. And then I invested in some equipment, and the audio got better. I had an article from a really good friend of mine, Adam, that was 27 steps to getting your podcast on iTunes, and that really is how everything started. And I can't believe I'm here. I was 47 years old last summer. I had just turned 47. I'll be 48 in about 10 days. That late in life, I did something that was so unexpected for me, and I'm so glad I did it. And I'm so thrilled that you guys are here tonight and that you all took the time to come out and be here for this. So thank you so much. I have so many notes because I want to make sure I don't forget anything that I'm going to be talking about tonight. And for the folks who are going to hear this as an episode, I know you're here with me in spirit. I really appreciate all the support that everybody shows online. So the first thing we need to do, which everybody knows we do early in the episodes, are the what-ups. Yes, thank you, the what-ups. Oh, and this is interactive, by the way. Just because I have a mic in my hand doesn't mean I'm the only one talking. I'm usually wishing I was talking to other people when I'm recording, so you can stop me, you can interrupt me, you can ask questions, you can laugh with me, you can curse with me. I'm probably gonna curse a little more than usual because I'm so excited that I can't help it. The fucks are just gonna fly. But yeah, so I want this to be, I want this to be interactive. It's not just you listening at home with your earbuds in or in your car on your Bluetooth. But the first person I need to give a what up to is a guy named David Steele, who is helping coordinate an event for Philly Podcast Festival at another venue right now. He hosts a really great show. It's called A Quest for Magic and Steel. It's a really fun Dungeons and Dragons podcast. So if any of you, like me, grew up in the 80s and were closet D&D players because you were afraid of getting shamed if you let people know that you played Dungeons & Dragons, it's a really great show. David reached out to me a few months ago and helped me learn about the Philadelphia Podcasting Society, which I didn't even know existed. And then he told me about the festival and encouraged me to apply. And that's really how I got here. So huge what up to David. I hope everybody will check out his show. The next what up goes to the guy with the camera. And the lady sitting in front of him, Tegan. Nathan and Tegan Karuna, did I say that correctly? Nathan and Tegan are the force behind the Philadelphia Podcasting Society. They created the organization, and then they also created the Philadelphia Podcast Festival. So you have done such an amazing thing, giving such a gift to the city. This is my first time here. I knew nothing about this before David reached out to me. And what an unbelievable experience and opportunity. So thank you both so much for what you do for podcasters in the city of Philadelphia. So let's give it up for Nathan and Tegan. What up to my dear friends who came out here tonight to support me? What up to all of the listeners who are here? Like, that is crazy that you guys would drive from all over to come and sit here and be with me tonight. So thank you so much. There was someone else who was supposed to be here tonight. She's become a dear friend over the last year. Her name is Erica, and she hosts a show. She's a Philadelphia podcaster. Hopefully, she'll be in the festival next year, but she hosts a true crime show called Apex and Abyss. Are there any Apex and Abyss listeners in the room? Yes, it's a great show if you haven't checked it out. Erica had an unexpected family commitment come up and she couldn't be here tonight. She's also a new mom, and some of us that have already had our kids, we know how that goes. But she really was a huge contributing factor before I'd ever even met her to me getting over my fear of launching a podcast that I didn't think anyone would want to listen to. So she is forever in my debt. A huge what up to Erica. I wish you were here tonight with me, little sister. As I said, I want this to be interactive, so I thought I'd start off with a Q&A. If anybody has any questions you want to ask about me, about the show, about each other, you can ask me anything. I can't promise you I will answer everything, but it's sort of fair game. And if nobody has any questions, then I'll sit here and feel weird. All right, Kenya.
So I have a question. This is from Ina.
Oh, Ina.
So that's my sister. So she told me to make sure that I ask this question. So she wants to know, are you going to do a show on any of the historical haunted homes in Fairmount Park? Because when we were little, there was one house that was right across the street from Smith Playground.
Okay.
Or like near Smith Playground. And my dad used to say, oh, that house is haunted, blah, blah, blah.
So Ina is Kenya's sister, and that's how I met Kenya. I met Ina when we worked together 22 years ago, and she is like a sister to me, and she's been a huge part of my life for a long time. She moved to North Carolina. You can tell Ina that I will do a show about the haunted homes in Fairmount Park if you and she will come on and guest host with me.
Oh my God, I would be honored. I'd die. I would love to. So, yes, of course.
All right, so good. So, new episode for the future.
All right.
Kim.
Who records the voice at the beginning of the podcast?
So Kristen, how are you, gorgeous? Oh my God. So the voice of the podcast for the intro is a guy named Dusty. I found him on Fiverr, which is an online service where you can get creative services like logos and voiceovers. I wanted a cheesy intro, and I mean like a seriously cheesy intro for the show. And I had initially asked my ex-husband, who is a musician, and he does cheesy voices like nobody's business. He's really good, he's really talented, but he's also really slow at delivering. And so after about 2 months, I said, screw this, and I went onto Fiverr and hired somebody. So his name is Dusty.
Does your daughter listen to the show?
My daughter listens to some episodes. She does not like anything spooky, so she won't listen to any of the haunted episodes. She listens to some true crime, but she won't listen to the Gary Heidnick episode, but she would listen to the episode about the Johnson gang. She listened to one of the Grace Packer episodes, the one that didn't talk about what had happened to her. So it depends on the episode. But yeah, she listens, or she'll listen to snippets of some. And she wanted to come tonight. I've mentioned on the show she has some health issues, and today just was not a great day for her. So she's gonna listen, once I upload it as an episode.
How do you find the topics or subject matters you cover?
A lot of it are topics that I know about. So living in suburban Philadelphia most of my life and spending a lot of time in the city, A lot of the stories are something that I am already aware of and want to talk about. I'll also get requests from listeners. Actually, the true crime element of the episode tonight that we're going to talk about is a story that's been requested multiple times. Sharon was one of the people that had requested it. It was something that was requested literally within 2 weeks after I launched Twisted Philly, and almost every month. So I really try to include stories that the listeners want to hear. And I'll map out like an outline of story ideas for a couple of months in advance. And then if something unexpected comes up, like when I went to CrimeCon and met Don and Leandra Morris, who are mother and father whose daughter has been missing for 4 years. And, you know, they're not from Philly, they're from Indianapolis, but I wanted to help get the story out about their daughter. That was something that was unexpected, so it bumped another couple of episodes. But a lot of it is just stuff that, you know, places that I love in Philadelphia that I hope other people will love too. I do have an interest in true crime, so some of the episodes are true crime. I have an interest in the paranormal, so there's episodes about ghosts and hauntings. So yeah, it's stuff that I like to talk about. It's weird. I created a podcast that I would like to listen to, and then holy shit, people besides me want to listen to it. Like the day I realized I had more followers than my friend list on Facebook was kind of a big day. Because, you know, of course you figure your friends and family, like, yeah, we're going to support you. But then when the balance started to shift, it was kind of mind-blowing.
Where's your favorite place to get a cheesesteak?
Oh, them's fighting words. So I don't eat beef or pork anymore, but I will treat myself once or twice a year to a cheesesteak with my daughter. Geno's used to be my favorite, but when they started their campaign about speak English, that was it. I stopped getting anything from Geno's because I had an issue with that. Then I went to Pat's. My daughter's favorite place is Jim's. So when we go for cheesesteaks, we got to go to Pat's first for me and then to Jim's for her. But we have some Philly natives here. Where do you get your cheesesteaks?
I'm in my late 40s. I'm done with cheese.
Yeah. Case in point, why I stopped eating meat.
Are you planning on covering the Johnston brothers?
Out in Kennett Square?
The Central Philly guys that they based the movie at close range?
That actually was an episode, I did cover that. It was an episode about 2 months ago.
They stole our uncle's tractor.
Did they really? You know, I always thought so. If you're not familiar, the Johnson Gang was a group of brothers out in Kennett Square, and they made a living by stealing and pillaging, and it was unbelievable the stuff that they stole. But one of the things they stole were farm equipment. Like, that's not an easy thing to steal. That shit is big. Like, how do you not miss that? That's crazy.
Backed up one night and took his big John Deere tractor.
Oh my God. So this is the second story you have a connection to.
Well, I have a connection with Sylvia Segrist. My best friend was in a mental hospital with her. One of the many times she was incarcerated prior to the shootings. She was a teenager, and he said she was such a giant pain in the ass to be around. And every time she came in the common room, we'd go back to the room.
Sylvia Segrist, I know there's some folks here that haven't listened to the show. Sylvia Segrist, back in '85, walked into the Springfield Mall in Delaware County with a semi-automatic rifle and shot 10 people, killing 3. It was bizarre for me, and I'm thinking, like, you too. You know, there's some folks here that are from Delaware County, and I was in that mall every weekend. I was a mall brat for sure, and we would see her. You know, we would see her walking through the mall in fatigues, and she would be ranting and raving and yelling at people. And what was sad for me about that episode, you know, besides how tragic it was, what she did, her family struggled for years to get her the kind of mental help that she needed. And at every turn, they were thwarted. They tried to get her committed months, I mean, off and on over the 6 months before she shot up the mall. And the state wouldn't commit her because she hadn't committed a violent act. She was only threatening to commit a violent act. So because she hadn't actually acted out on these threats, they wouldn't commit her. And then she went to the Best store. She tried to get a gun from Kmart. The guy at Kmart thought she looked a little off, so he told her, oh, your application got denied. They never sent it in. They never processed it. So she went to the old Best store that used to be in the Lawrence Park Shopping Center ages ago and bought a gun at Best. You know, you could get towels there, you could get electric can openers there, and you could get semi-automatic rifles. Yeah, right in Broomall, right? Let me outfit my bathroom and buy a gun.
And Caleb Fairley, I worked as a doorman in a building in Valley Forge Park. The weekend we committed his murders.
Caleb Fairley, the story we're talking about, is a young man who went to Upper Marion High School, which is where I live. He graduated in 91, and a few years later he was working at his parents' children's clothing store in Collegeville, where Sarah's from. And a young mother named Lisa Mandarak and her 20-month-old daughter went in to shop, and she appealed to him. And he locked the door, and he tried to assault her, and she fought back, and he killed her. Now you guys see what happens when I record. I am the podcaster who cries. And then he took the life of her daughter. And that afternoon, within about an hour and a half of this, he disposed of Devin, that was her daughter, in Valley Forge Park. He just drove through the park, tossed her down a hill, and a couple of joggers found her. She was thrown away like trash. The police acted very quickly. Upper Marion Police and the police in Upper Providence and Collegeville worked really quickly, and they identified Caleb. Like, they knew exactly where she was shopping. They knew the shopping center she was in. They knew what time she was supposed to be home. Caleb had scratches all over his face. The police were certain, within hours that this young man did it, but they didn't know where Lisa's body was, the mother. They made a deal with his attorney that they would take the death penalty off the table if Caleb would let them know where Lisa was. Her family was not happy with that. Her family really wanted them to go for the death penalty, but the district attorney was really concerned that the longer her body went unfound, there would be critical evidence that would make it really difficult to prosecute if they didn't have. They went ahead and made that deal even against the wishes of her family. And there is a gorgeous park in Upper Providence that has been dedicated to Lisa and Devin. If you're ever out that way, it's a beautiful park for children. There's enormous slides and a castle, and the slides form the shape of a heart. It was just citizens of the community went to the township and said, we want money to create something. And the township donated land for this park. The citizens of the township, people that didn't even know them, raised all the money to build the park. And it's a really beautiful tribute to a beautiful mother and daughter who never should have had that. It shouldn't have happened. Caleb had issues in high school. He'd been arrested for assaulting a jogger in Bridgeport, which isn't too far from Collegeville. He never should have been allowed to work alone in that space where women and children were going to be. Yeah, it's hard telling stories about. And I know I'm completely off topic right now, but it's hard sometimes telling stories about where you're from. But that was what I set out to do, because you meet people that know someone who knows someone, or you remember, and we remember what these events did to our community. And that's why Twisted Philly isn't all true crime, because you see what happens. I'm sitting here talking about it and I start crying. I can't tell true crime all the time. And I love other things. I love talking about ghost stories, and I love talking about history. My hope is that, I know a lot of people, true crime is kind of the big genre of podcasts. I think people come for the true crime, and then I always hope that they'll stay for the rest of it, that they'll stay for the story about the Philadelphia Zoo and the Mutter Museum and the Magic Gardens down the street at 10th and South, and they'll stay for, just the stuff that makes me happy about the city. And hopefully it'll also give people the idea that even for all of the terrible things that happen here sometimes, there's so much beauty and so much enjoyment to be had in Philadelphia and surrounding Philadelphia, that they'll realize it's not all bad. So that's really what I try to do.
You do a great job.
Thank you. My God. I don't know how this is my life. I've known Kristen for ages. We work together. Nick and I are new work buddies, and he's become such a good friend. And so many of you, I talk to you every day online. I look at Jackie over there, who has become such a good friend through work too, and Pricey and Kenya. It's like the fact that you guys are here to see me doing this is just, it's unreal. It is. It's completely unreal. I don't know how this happened. I want this episode to be a combination of, and I know we've only got about a half an hour left, but I wanted this episode to be a combination of all of the stories I like to tell. So it's a little bit of history, a little bit of tourism. What are you doing with that cup? You guys can't see this, but Adam from Nerds with Words has sucked a cup to his face, and it looks like a little baby elephant trunk. You walk to the table, man. It's all right. All right. So it's going to be a little bit of history, a little bit of tourism, and definitely some true crime. And you know what story we're going to be talking about. And it's all about South Street, right? Because that's where we are. We're at Tattooed Moms. If you guys are drinking, please tip your servers, tip your bartenders. I don't want anybody walking out of here tonight after work saying that Twisted Philly crowd were cheap as fuck, right? I want them to say, Man, that Twisted Philly crowd took good care of us. So tip your servers. So I want to talk about the history and what I love about South Street, some of my experiences here, and then a little bit of true crime. And for me, history always starts with one person. The history of Philadelphia. Anybody guess?
Billy Penn.
Oh, was that Jackie? T-shirt. Okay, so when I ask a question, the first person to answer it is going to get a T-shirt. I did not bring T-shirts because I want you to be able to go on the website, pick the design, pick the color. I'm wearing the one that says it's never just a mannequin because usually cops see dead bodies and they think they're mannequins, and I don't understand why. But the crazy thing is, for the last couple weeks, so many listeners have been posting pictures to the Twisted Philly Facebook page of random mannequins on the side of the road. Like, what the fuck? Who is throwing away all these mannequins? And where did they get them to begin with? Do you just sneak them out of Macy's in a giant shopping bag? I don't know, but...
I have a quick story.
Yes. No, not at all.
So back in New York, someone on their front lawn, or on someone else's front lawn, dug a whole grave and half-buried mannequin, and we got called it over.
They thought it was a dead body.
That shit happened.
It's crazy. Clearly, sometimes it is a mannequin, even though my T-shirt says otherwise. But for me, what I think is really cool about South Street is that it was part of William Penn's original grid plan for the city back in 1682. So over 300 years ago, he had already mapped out South Street. Now, he called it Cedar Street, and even through my research, and I dig pretty deep, I wasn't able to find exactly when the name changed. At that time, it was considered, it would be the southernmost part of the city, that there would be nothing beyond South Street. And obviously today, that is not the case. There's so much beyond just South Street. But back then, the only thing past South Street were farms and Delaware County, which really wasn't Delaware County then. It was just a bunch of farms. South Philly was the home of America's very first African Methodist Episcopal Church, Mother Bethel Church. Freed slaves from the South, when they would migrate north, so many of them settled here in South Philadelphia and on South Street, especially in the 7th Ward, closer to Broad Street, so that they could be where Mother Bethel Church was. As much as you think, freed slaves coming from the South up to the north, that they would have a safe haven where they could really start to rebuild their lives without the chains of slavery. In 1842, just 2 blocks away at 6th and Lombard, there was a riot of white residents of South Street who went after the black community in the 7th Ward. They burned down their churches. It lasted for 3 days. They looted their homes. The people that migrated here for what they thought would be safety and to be welcomed by the North, after a couple of decades, were met with something very different. The neighborhoods of South Street throughout history have really been a place of migration, not just from freed slaves that were migrating north, but there was an immigration center in the 1870s right at the edge of South Street along the river. There was a big immigration station, so huge amounts of European immigrants from so many different countries, and it's what built what I think is just a really culturally unique and culturally diverse area of the city here in South Philadelphia. Our very first theater in Philadelphia was here on South Street. It was at the corner of 4th. The interesting thing about this theater was it had to be built on the south side of South Street, so almost like behind South Street. Can anybody guess why it couldn't be considered in the city proper?
Because it was burlesque.
It was not burlesque, although wouldn't that have been cool, right? It wasn't alcohol. It was the Quakers. No live performances were allowed within city limits at the time. So building the theater on like the back of South Street considered it to be outside of the city limits. So that whole Quaker methodology of live and let live applied to everybody, but apparently not actors. And then apparently not booze either, because considering the theater was taken over by, a rye whiskey distillery still on the opposite side of South Street. Fast forward a little bit, and in the 1900s, South Street really became a mecca of commerce. So down by 4th Street, it was like our own little mini garment district, similar to what they have in New York. 4th Street was Fabric Row. There were garment warehouses, garment workhouses, which maybe weren't the best place to work. And then in the 60s, there was a pretty famous song about South Street. Does anybody know what it was? Hippies meet South Street, South Street. It was by a group called the Orleans in 1963, and it was about South Street because it was the hippest place in the city. Things really changed a lot as you got into the 60s. South Street was, and the community down here, it really had very little racial boundaries. It had very little social and economic boundaries. You'd have people from really all walks of life coming to enjoy whatever they wanted and mix with people that in other neighborhoods in the city they might never have the opportunity to mix with. That atmosphere really kind of carried through into the 80s and the 90s. The other cool thing for me that happened in the 60s on South Street was the TLA opened in 1964. So the TLA, pardon me while I take a sip. I should have done the drinking game where every time I curse, you guys take a drink. Yes, Pricey, you want to start doing that? Okay. So every time I curse more? Okay. I haven't been cursing much. So my most memorable experience, I have two and I'll share them with you. My most memorable experience on South Street was the first time I came to the TLA. I was 18 or 19 and it was back when Rocky Horror was running on Friday nights.
It's astounding. Time is fleeting. Madness takes its toll.
And it was my first experience seeing Rocky Horror on a big screen and audience participation. But the jacked up thing was, I'm sorry, should I say fucked up? That way you'll drink? All right, but the fucked up thing was a friend of mine had gotten a cassette tape, all right? So clearly we're going way back. I'm talking about cassette tapes. He had a friend of his in New York who went to see Rocky Horror in New York, and they brought in a tape recorder. And they recorded whatever they could pick up on their little tape recorders so that they could hear the audience participation. So my friends and I thought we were like super cool because we knew the audience participation for Rocky Horror. What I didn't realize was Rocky Horror audience participation varied depending on which part of the country you were in. So I'm here at the TLA thinking I am cool as shit. I've got rice with me, I've got a newspaper with me, I've got all the props, right? And I'm all ready to share my audience participation, and the time comes and I start screaming out the wrong shit because I listened to the audience participation in New York, which was different from Philly. But that was my first experience on South Street, and even though my family would come into the city so often, I never got to South Street until I started coming on my own. So the first time I saw Zipperhead, like I thought I was gonna lose my mind. There were dudes walking around in mohawks. Oh my God, they were beautiful. Like studs around their necks and dog chains and collars and leather. And so that was where I started buying my Doc Martens, was at Zipperhead. And I posted a picture of Zipperhead on the Twisted Philly page a little while ago. I asked some folks like, hey, what was your favorite thing about South Street back in the day? And a lot of the folks who responded said, oh, South Street sucks now. It's not as good as when we used to hang out there. And Zipperhead's gone. No, it's not. It's over on 4th Street. It's called Crash Bang Boom now. I thought that was really unfair because when I was hanging out on South Street like you in the late 80s and the early 90s, there were people in their 40s and 50s who used to hang out here in the 60s saying, oh, it sucks now because it's different than when we hung out there. It's important to stay relevant to new generations. I think it's great that there are so many new people building memories and experiences down here on South Street and in places like Tattooed Moms.
I remember in South Street, like for Philly, like when the Greek picnic started, like I don't know if y'all know what the Greek picnic was. So when I turned about 19, it was like, oh, I want to go to the Greek picnic, but I couldn't go to the picnic. My parents wouldn't allow me to go. So you just come down to South Street afterwards and hang out afterwards. But after a few years, then the cops kind of shut it down.
Yeah.
I think they started the cops kind of came in and got everything under control, or what they thought was under control for the Greek picnic and for other events that would happen on South Street. So I think maybe for our generation, that's some of why everybody now is oh, South Street sucks because you come down here and you can't drive on certain streets on the weekend and things like that.
It was a little wilder, I think. I think it was definitely a little wilder. And not wild in a bad way, but it was freer, and the folks that were hanging out here in the 60s probably felt it was even freer for them, and I'm sure it was. My other crazy experience, one of my favorite memories on South Street was when I came to get my navel pierced. So I was 22, so this is going back 25 years ago.
He said, what's a navel?
What's a navel? It's your belly button. Jeff, do you have any piercings? Are you sure? Yeah, that's what I figured. It's my good friend Jeff, everybody. Say hi really loud. There we go. So I wanted to get my navel pierced. I was 22 and definitely in different shape, the kind that would walk around in midriff tops and show off that navel piercing and the vinyl dresses from Zipperhead. What the fuck was I thinking? So the only place you could get piercings in the city was at Inferno, and there was only one guy that did it. Do you remember his name?
No, I remember Inferno.
Does anybody?
I'm not getting pierced, so I didn't even know.
So it was Jim the Body Piercer. Like, that's what he went by, was Jim the Body Piercer. I come down, Jim was great, everything was super clean and sterile, and he explains all the pain, which was really nice. Didn't hurt anywhere near as badly as I thought it would. And I thought he was done, and so I made the mistake of sitting up to look, and all he had done was put the needle through. And so then I passed right back out, landed on the table. So it doesn't hurt anywhere near as much as I thought it would. The 6 weeks afterwards while it healed was, oh dear God, it was horrible. But I was so jazzed and so wired with adrenaline after that. And I had a friend of mine come with me, and she was much more conservative and kind of embarrassed that we were doing this. We come out of Inferno, which wasn't too far from where we are now, and I'm like, I gotta get a drink. I'm so wired, I need a cocktail, we gotta go drinking. So we go down to a bar, and there's these two, I don't know if they were squatters or homeless dudes, these two young homeless guys hanging out, sitting on the street. They're like, hey, could you spare any change? I was like, why don't you come and have some drinks with us? So I picked up a couple of homeless guys and took them to dinner and bought them a bunch of beers. And that's my navel piercing story from South Street. Yeah, that was how I used to roll back in the day. But I know we're getting a little short on time, so I'm gonna transition into the true crime segment of the episode. As Sharon mentioned, this is a case that I've had people ask me to cover literally since the first, probably about 2 weeks after I launched the podcast. And I've had repeated requests as recently as last week. I wanted to talk about a true crime situation from South Street. This is a story that has been covered on other podcasts. If anybody listens to the Vanished podcast, which is another true crime show, it's hosted by another Philadelphian. Her name is Marissa. It's a show about missing persons exclusively, and it's a really well done show. It's not always about Philadelphia, but this case was covered as well. It's the disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Patrone. So I see a couple of head nods. While I'm talking about it, contribute to the conversation. It doesn't only have to be me. This happened 12 years ago. It was 12 years ago in February. And on February 19th in 2005, there was a couple, Danielle Imbo, who was 34, Richard Patrone, who was 35. They were enjoying some cocktails down the street, just about a block and a half from here, at what used to be Abilene's Bar and Grill. I think it's a Thai restaurant now, so Abilene's closed, but it's a place I used to like hanging out at too. So who were these folks? Danielle was a single mom. She was 34 years old. She lived in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. And at the time of her disappearance, she was estranged from her husband. His name was Joe Imbo. Richard Patrone was also a single father. He was living in Ardmore for a while above his family's business, and then eventually moved to South Philadelphia. And the way that this couple met, they had been family friends for a very long time. Danielle went to high school with Richard's younger sister, Christine. They were really good friends. Danielle met her husband, Joe, in 2002. She worked at a car dealership. She did all the finances for the car dealer. Joe walked in. He was looking for a new car, and he was instantly smitten with Danielle. She was beautiful, and if you got your phones on you, feel free to pull them out, look her up. When I look at pictures of her, she had, kind of short, bobbed black hair, almost in that Vidal Sassoon style from the 70s. She reminds me very much of the lead singer of Susie and the Banshees. Does anybody know who I'm talking about, Susie and the Banshees? I know, the 40-plus generation, we know what we're talking about. So, all right, so you know what? I have to do this. I have to, because you have to be exposed to good music. All right, so I'm gonna pick a Susie song. Anybody? Besides me and you. Bueller. Dude, did you just say Pulsations?
I heard her.
Trust me, you did not hear Susie at Pulsations.
You used to go to the bank?
I did used to go to the bank.
They played her a while.
And I used to go to Revival. We were probably hanging out at the same spots at the same time and didn't even know it. Yeah. Maybe we danced with each other.
I'm sure.
Anyway, Danielle Imbo reminds me a lot of Susie from Susie and the Banshees. And she was in a band. She used to sing for a band, and that was something her husband really didn't dig. In 2004, after they had a baby, he left to go to the Super Bowl in New Orleans. He met somebody on the plane. He came home and said, "I'm leaving you. I met somebody on the plane on the way to New Orleans." He leaves, he flies down to Georgia. She's on her own, adjusting to being a single parent. She knew Richard Patrone. They were family friends. Richard was living above his parents' business, which is Viking Pastries in Ardmore. Yeah. So if you've ever had the chocolate shaving cake from there, like that is their signature cake. It looks like this giant mound of cake and icing and sweet baby Jesus. It's so fucking good. And it's covered with all these like circular curls of dark and white chocolate. That was his signature cake. He lived above the apartment there. He was raising his daughter until she was about 13, and then his daughter wanted to move to Philadelphia to be closer to her mom, and Richard moved to Philadelphia with her. He and Danielle had known each other a long time, and they started dating sort of casually after she split up from her husband. It wasn't a very serious relationship for her because she was really focused on adjusting to being a single parent, but he really fell in love with her very quickly. Her ex-husband shows up back in the picture. He wants to get back together. She's not feeling it. She really ended the relationship with Richard as well. This was early 2005. So one night, February 19th, Richard is hanging out here on South Street. He used to live on Snyder Avenue, and he's alone, and he doesn't really want to go home. And so he starts texting some friends and family to see if anybody's around to maybe meet up for a drink. And he gets a hold of his sister, and sure enough, she's out with Danielle. And his sister declines the drink, but Danielle says, yeah. So they meet up at Abilene's, and they hang out with friends, and everybody reported that even though they had broken up recently, they were really happy to see each other. They were kissing. It was just a few days after Valentine's Day. They were very romantic with one another. They left early. They were only there till about 11:45. Richard offered to drive her home to Mount Laurel. Danielle had a hair appointment the next day. Richard was going to watch the Daytona 500. They left in his 2001 Dodge Dakota truck, and that was on February 19th, 12 years ago. And there has not been a word from them since. There is no evidence of a crime. Neither one of them have been found. Richard's truck hasn't been found. There is no evidence of anything. They disappeared off the face of the earth. The first indication that something was wrong was about 11 a.m. the next day, Sunday, February 20th, when Danielle didn't show up for a hair appointment. Now, ladies, we all know you got a hair appointment, especially on a Sunday, because not a lot of salons are open on a Sunday. You're going to make that appointment, or you're going to call to reschedule. You do not shit on your stylist. I just cursed again, Pricey, so drink. Danielle didn't show up for the hair appointment. She also wasn't home when her ex-husband was supposed to drop off her son. As a single mom, I can tell you that's something we don't miss. You know, we make sure we're there for those handoffs. Her brother, John, who had a key to her house, went to her home. Nothing was out of place. Everything was fine. Richard's brother, who also happened to be named John, and here's the thing, in Italian families in Philadelphia, most of the boys are named after the apostles. Richard's father and his brother, they went driving all night long. They drove every route that he could have possibly taken from Abilene's here on South Street to Danielle's home in Mount Laurel. They drove the highways, they went over the bridges, they took all of the back roads. Anything that looked like Richard's truck, this giant black Dodge Dakota, they pulled over, they tried to see if it was his truck. They found nothing. For weeks, hundreds of volunteers and family members searched all over Philadelphia and New Jersey. Danielle's brother hired a police officer from Camden to take him up in a helicopter. It cost him over $1,000 to fly the routes between South Street and Mount Laurel, and they couldn't find anything. The rumor is the police officer that took him up on that ride said, "You're never going to find anything. This is too clean." And it's been that way for 12 years. Of course, her ex-husband was investigated because it's always the ex-husband, right? Her ex-husband, Joe Imbo, had a pretty rock-solid alibi for the night of the disappearance. He was at a party over an hour away with his stepfather, who was a retired member of the NYPD, and a lot of the other people at the party that night were also either current or former police officers. It's a pretty solid alibi. You got a bunch of cops backing you up. Doesn't mean it's not true. So he was never considered a suspect, but he's also never been, I guess, technically cleared. He did an interview with Philadelphia Magazine back in 2014. The interviewer asked him point blank, "Did you have anything to do with this?" And he said, "Absolutely not. I couldn't live with myself and raise our son if I had done this. I wouldn't be able to look him in the face. But one of the FBI investigators, a man named Vito Roselli, who's still on the case, Joe Imbo claimed to this reporter that Roselli told him, I don't think you did it. I don't think you had anything to do with the actual disappearance, but I think you were behind it. And I think there's something you know and there's something you're not telling us. But there's absolutely no evidence to indicate that, so there's nothing the police can do. In 2010, there was a rumor that there was a Kensington drug lord who ran a prescription pill ring who was in jail here in Philadelphia. He took his own life in 2010, and some claimed that in his suicide note, he took credit for killing Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone. The police that saw the suicide note said that that was bullshit. That wasn't in the note. It was just jailhouse rumors. The FBI, Philadelphia police, Mount Laurel police are, I won't say convinced, because I think that's too strong a word, but they are fairly certain that this was a murder for hire. Because you can think about disposing bodies, and not like that's something that we think about, but you can understand where if somebody is murdered, the person that did that might be able to dispose of the body, especially here, right, in the tri-state area. Like, I think about the Jersey Pine Barrens. Anybody know what the Pine Barrens are? I know we got some folks that aren't local, but, you know, it's miles and miles along the Jersey Turnpike and the Garden State Parkway that it's what it says. It's Pine Barrens. There ain't shit there except pine trees and swamp. I swear to God, there's got to be so many people killed by the mob buried in the Pine Barrens. And I probably shouldn't say that because, like, I don't need Skinny Joey coming looking for me because I said something about the mob. And it doesn't mean that I believe that's where Danielle and Richard are, but it would be easy enough to dispose of a body. But how the fuck do you get rid of a truck that weighs between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds? And there's no sign of it anywhere. Like, it's just gone. There was never any use on either of their cell phones. There was never any use on either of their credit cards. There was a pretty big press conference back in 2010, actually on February 19th, on the anniversary of their disappearance. And the FBI agents said that they absolutely believe that this was some sort of a very premeditated, very organized type of hit. And, you know, one of the sad things about this, besides the fact that they're children, so Danielle and Joe's son, he was barely a year to a year and a half old when she disappeared. So he's grown up almost his entire life without his mother. He lives in North Carolina now with his father. He comes back to Philadelphia for a few weeks every year. He comes back around the holidays to visit his extended family. He comes back in the summer, and his grandparents take him to the Jersey Shore for vacation. Richard's daughter was 14 when he disappeared. She's almost 26 now, and
What was the motive behind the murder?
Very good question. That segues into my next talking point. One of the other sad things about this is both of these families who were close, like their kids went to high school together, they grew up together, they're no longer close. There's a couple reasons for that. Richard's family felt almost immediately he was gone. His mother, Marge, said by the next day she felt in her soul he was dead. So when I lost my dad, this is going back 18 years ago, I didn't know at the moment that that's what had happened. I was in New Orleans on my honeymoon of all things. It was 1 a.m. back home. It was midnight in New Orleans, and something hit me. I knew something was wrong. I knew something was something had happened. I didn't know what it was. I found out the next morning. So when I read that, I believe in that shit. I believe that you have connections with people that when something goes south, maybe you feel it. And so Richard's family felt almost immediately that he was gone, that he had been murdered. Danielle's family has held out faith because there's no proof that they died, that maybe they're still alive. And wouldn't that be a nice hope to hold on to, right? If you don't know 100% that someone you love is gone, then why not believe that they're not gone? So that's one of the first challenges between the families, is that they each approached this horrible circumstance very differently. And then they started finger pointing. So Richard's family blamed Danielle's ex-husband, Joe Imbo. They believe he had something to do with this. He had very harsh words with Richard before their disappearance. Danielle's family believes there's something in Richard's past that might have contributed to this, like maybe a gambling debt. But the police, the FBI, have investigated both of their pasts repeatedly, and there is nothing in either one of their pasts that could ever come back to bite them in the ass like this. Like, they were both good people, decent people, good jobs, respectable members of society. Neither one of them drank too much. Neither one of them did drugs. Neither one of them ran in bad circles. Even though the FBI thinks that this could have been a murder for hire, There's no criminal element like drug dealing or money laundering or some kind of connection to the mob. Danielle's family for a time wondered if Richard had connections. He didn't. And so that's why it comes back to that federal investigator thinking that her husband, her ex-husband, maybe orchestrated something. But again, there's nothing that would, there's no evidence to that. Over the last 2 years, the FBI has said that they have some very promising leads that they're following. They have not indicated what those leads are. There's no information. So I called repeatedly. I've called and emailed the FBI's Public Affairs Office. I was very clear in my voicemails and my emails, and I've said, I understand as an open case, there's probably not a lot you can share with me. But if there is anything you can share, or maybe I could just ask you a few questions, or could I perhaps speak to Investigator Roselli? I haven't heard back from them. I'm going to keep calling. If I do hear back from them, I'll do an update in a future episode. But I do want to share the Philadelphia tip line because there is still a $50,000 reward for information leading to an arrest or information that could lead to the whereabouts of Danielle and Richard. So anyone with information is asked to call the Philadelphia Citizens Crime Commission tip line, and that phone number is 215-546-TIPS. I'm going to give it again, 215-546-TIPS, and the tips can remain anonymous.
I feel like the truck could have been taken to like a salvage yard and destroyed. And that's why they never found it. Or a chop shop. Yeah.
So one of the, you could bury a truck? Jesus, how big of a ditch would you have to dig for that? Jeff, could you bury a truck like that? I asked Jeff because you drive trucks like that, man. You know what I'm talking about.
Or really hell or high water, they're doing like 5.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't thinking that.
Fuck, you could bury a truck.
I mean, but people bury buses to live in.
People bury buses to live in where? In Lancaster?
Our Amish are really resourceful.
Goddamn Amish. Really? Oh my God, that's freaky. One of the things that Philadelphia police had said to Danielle's brother, John, is that it's entirely possible along these lines that both Danielle and Richard and the truck were compacted or incinerated. If you know Philly, there's so many auto junkyards and it'd be easy enough to do. What saddens me the most is I can't even imagine what it would be like to lose a family member through these circumstances, but the not knowing and not one shred of evidence for 12 years. It's fucking scary. Well, guys, we are at the end of our time. Shit, I didn't think I'd go the full hour, but we did. Of course we went the full hour because I talk like a motor mouth, right? Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking time away from your families and anything else you could have been doing tonight to spend tonight with me. It means so much to me. The show and this past year have been unlike anything I've ever experienced, and it's because of all of you and the people who are listening at home. So thank you so much. Kim from Lancaster is going to take us out.
Ciao for now, Twisters.
Thank you, baby. Holy fuck.